Hello.
Hello.
And welcome
Oh,
to Film Franchise Fortnights
Oh.
on the Cult Popture podcast. I am your host, Richard Ravioli Martin.
And I am also your host. What's my Instagram handle? Children of Meme. Follow me on Instagram at Children of Meme.
Yeah. What else have you been? Call Meme by your name.
Call Meme by your name. I was also 28 memes later.
And I know who killed Meme.
Yeah, I know who killed Meme. So I'm cycling through some of the best movies ever made, obviously. Replacing one of the words with memes. Anyway, follow me on Instagram.
Follow Meme on Instagram.
Follow Meme. That's great.
You missed your chance.
I tried to do Despicable Meme, but it was already taken. But I guess that's the obvious one.
Yeah, Despicable Meme. That is a good one.
Yeah.
All right. So, AJ, what are we doing? What's this podcast?
So this is Film Franchise Fortnights. This is something we do every fortnight.
Which is 2 weeks for those who don't know.
Yeah, for those and our American listeners, where a fortnight is 3 weeks. Here in New Zealand, it's actually only 2. Anyway, so so we watch an entire film franchise in that fortnight, and then we turn on the podcast machine to tell the world and all 173 of our regular listeners what we think of said franchise. Sometimes it's a franchise that everyone's seen, and it's more of like a cathartic thing for people to tune in and listen. Oh, what do the Cult Popture boys think of the Transformers movies or Kung Fu Panda? Yeah. Sometimes it's a touch more obscure, like, oh, what do the Cult Popture boys think of Air Bud? All 17 of them. And sometimes it's kind of a hybrid of both, depending on who you are and what niches of film you fall into.
And what you look like.
Yeah. What? Such is the nature of this kind of... I feel like there's a sect of society that are really into the franchise that we're covering today.
It's a very recognizable franchise. Whether or not people have actually seen them, I think, is a different story. Very
true. And I don't know why we're acting like it's going to be a surprise when you've already seen...
when it's the fucking title of the episode.
The title of the episode. But Richard, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about Hellraiser. Ooh. The 10-film iconic horror franchise.
Yeah.
From the mind of Clive Barker.
So I have so many questions, Richard, and I'm sure we'll get to all of them. I haven't written a single one down, so I'll probably forget. But about a year and a half ago on this podcast, we covered the Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th.
It's actually pretty close to 2 years now.
Oh, really?
It was our last franchise of second to last franchise of 2016.
Wow. So we covered all 20-ish, I think, of those movies. 20 movies. And we sort of gotten ingrained in the slasher horror world that those two franchises, Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, kind of championed. Like they are held in very high regard by the people who like them.
And so they should be.
Yeah, and for sure. But we did kind of feel while doing the episode that there was still more to discover in this weird kind of slasher horror world, and
it's specifically ones that got like dozens of sequels.
Yeah, and Hellraiser was probably the next one on that list of like iconic horror villains, I guess, is the main distinguisher about it. Yeah.
And of course, Nightmare on Elm Street, you've got Freddy Krueger with his bloody claw fingers and his Bernie face. You've got Friday the 13th's Jason Voorhees with his hockey mask, which he only gets in the third film, and his lumbering stature and his machete. And Hellraiser has Pinhead, the demon, the Cenobite, if you will.
Is that it?
Yeah.
I watched these movies on a very tedious sound system and did not hear it as Cenobite once.
What did you
I heard
hear?
like Cinnabon. I heard like Megabyte. You know that I was trying to. I couldn't remember it off the top of my head.
Right.
And then I feel like they don't say it for like 4 movies in a row at one point, and then it comes back in, and you're like, oh yeah, that's what they're called. So Cenobites or
Cenobite. Cenobite.
Cenobite. Okay, go on, please.
So you've probably seen this character before in some form or another. He's got pale white skin and a grid carved into his head with nails sticking out of all of the vertices.
Did you have to look up the right terminology there, or did you just know
vertices?
Intersecting the intersecting point on a grid are called vertices.
No, that's just actually, to be fair,
I didn't know it, so
oh.
You're better at maths than me, though.
Yeah. No, vertex.
All right.
Vertices. Anyway, yeah, you made me doubt myself for a second because I thought maybe it only was for 3D objects, but no.
I did not mean to make you doubt yourself, Richard. I would never do that.
Yeah, no, it's like year 6 geometry. So
right. Nice.
Maybe you need to retake year 6 geometry, AJ.
I don't think I did take that. So, Hellraiser.
Came out in 1987.
Yeah.
And it was directed by Clive Barker, who, if you mention to people that are like kind of in the know, he's like David Cronenberg kind of person, like an auteur that's like known as being real fucking weird.
Yeah.
And yeah, so just so you know, just so we know as well what was going on in 1987. You also had Evil Dead 2 came out,
right.
Nightmare on Elm Street 3, and
right.
let me just check if there was a Friday the 13th that year.
There would have been, surely, because they were already going for a while.
No, actually, there was one in 6 came out in 86 and 7 came out in 88. So it wasn't
there you go.
Thing that year.
Hellraiser filling the Friday the 13th,
yeah.
13th size hole. So I have so many questions, and we've talked about this before with some previous podcasts that Richard and I tend to take turns in who does all the research. Typically, that doesn't necessarily stop the other from looking into it if he wants. It's more just like Richard hosts Mission Impossible and I host Kung Fu Panda. And we come together, and whatever we both know, we both know. But you specifically asked me not to research anything.
Yeah, because like often, if you're doing it, I'll be like, oh, who's that actor? And I'll look them up, and then you kind of end up on like a trail and stuff like that. And so, yeah, because this franchise, this is one of the ones that I was reading about a few weeks ago, and I knew kind of a couple of interesting pieces of trivia. And I was like, I want you to watch the films without knowing this stuff and see what you think.
But I have to say, if there was ever a franchise in which I felt I needed to know more, it's got to be this one, man. Not even out of
fire away your questions. I have the answers.
So you've already kind of answered who's Clive Barker, because the first film is called like Clive Barker's Hellraiser. He's like the Jim Henson to the Muppets of the Hellraiser series. And so, but I was like, who the hell is this guy? So he's just. What else did he do?
He's an author as well, and he's done like comic books and stuff like that. So, but he's known for that kind of really kind of weird, creepy sort of horror. And like, there's a few people at work that I've like mentioned them watching Hellraiser, and like, oh, Clive Barker's a fucking weirdo.
Right. Yeah, he is.
And someone was like, I asked one of the older guys, I was like, have you ever seen the Hellraiser movies? He's like, yeah, I saw the first one on the cinema. He's like, hey, Clive Barker's he's a strange dude.
Is he still around? Is he still kicking it?
Yes, he is, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
And we'll get to that.
I guess. I mean, it's not bad. I wouldn't wish death upon anyone. But anyway, okay.
Yeah, so should we have a go at giving a synopsis of the film? Because
so this is gonna... Oh, shit. This is gonna be hard.
Because the thing is, and I experienced this on Friday when I was talking to people at work about doing this, and it's like Freddy versus like Nightmare on Elm Street.
Ask me what Nightmare on Elm Street as a series is about.
Okay, what's Nightmare on Elm Street about?
It's about a like villain who can intercept your dreams and kill you in your sleep.
And if you die in the dream, you die in real life.
You die for real, yeah.
What's Friday the 13th about?
So Friday the 13th is pretty simple. Basically, there's a dude who drowned and he's come back as like a monster ghost kind of thing, and he's hell-bent on revenge on people who are doing the same behavior that those who were responsible for his death were doing. Simple, easy, makes sense, obvious.
What's Scream about?
Scream is kind of a lampshade hanging tribute or homage to horror about a serial killer or serial killers who are targeting this one girl for various different reasons. Each one features several bloody deaths, and
it's a meta slasher.
Yeah, meta slasher, sure. Yeah.
What's Evil Dead about?
Evil Dead is about a guy who opens various portals to hell and the past. And yes, that's weird, but it's easy to explain. Like, it's not as succinct.
And AJ, what is Hellraiser about?
I know I've seen it. No, it's about, okay, the first film, because the series isn't about a single thing. The only two factors that are in each film is the character of Pinhead, who's a Cenobite, and a puzzle box, which is like that opens the gateway to hell when you open it.
And it's called the Le Mans configuration.
Okay.
Which is like, so I was reading about, as the films go on, and it talks about, the box is called the Lament, like Lament, lament as in like you lament
something,
something. But then in like the seventh film, or even later than that, someone's like the Le Mans configuration, and I was like, what?
Le Mans,
because it's not said out loud. So I am going to call it the Lament configuration.
Okay,
for the podcast.
All right, that's fine.
That's
I'll call it the Le Mans configuration, and we'll satisfy everyone. Okay, so the first film, the first film starts with this dude in some like weird, Middle Eastern. No, just Eastern. He's just in an Eastern nondescript country, and he scores the Le Mans configuration, and he opens it, and when it opens, these chains shoot out from the ether and like rip his skin off. They hook into him and they rip his skin off, and you presume he's dead. He gets dragged to hell. And then we go to another story. There's no log line for this film. I don't know how to do a log line. I have to go beat by beat through the film. So then we go to the guy we just saw. We go to his brother, and he's got a wife and a daughter who have just moved into the brother's the house where he died. Sure, okay, there we go. And they're moving all their stuff in. They don't know he's dead. They think he's just gone. They think he's just missing. And you come to find out through some very like kind of vaguely edited flashbacks that
very sexy flashbacks.
Yeah, that the wife, whose name is, can we remember her name?
No, there's no point.
It's
Julia. I believe it's Julia.
Julia, you're right. She had an affair with Frank, who's the original guy who we saw get dragged to hell at the start. And so she's now living in this house where, it's kind of like the sins of her past are very prevalent in her mind. And you might go, oh, that's interesting that Julia's the protagonist. No, she's not. The protagonist isn't the protagonist till the last act. So
Julia's the antagonist.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So basically, her husband, Frank's brother, cuts himself on a loose nail. And while he goes into one of Frank's old rooms, and it's the room where he got dragged to hell in, and he spills some blood on the floorboards. And when he leaves the room, we see the blood get absorbed by some kind of organic beating heart kind of looking thing beneath the floorboards. And what that does is that it brings the once damned Frank back up from hell. And he looks like Pinhead now. No, he doesn't, but that would make sense considering how iconic Pinhead is with the franchise, but he's not even in it yet. I think he appears at the start and then very briefly. But the problem with Frank is now he's like he's all muscle and bone. He's lost
he's
his
mostly
skin
bone
still.
at this point.
Yeah. And anyway, Julia finds him, and basically this is where the premise of the film kind of kicks off, is that Julia is coaxed into bringing men back to the house by the bloody and muscly Frank, where she kills them, and Frank sucks their blood and
absorbs the blood and gives them more body.
Yeah, he's slowly regaining what he used to look like. I guess it culminates in the daughter becoming aware of it. And she gets thrown, everyone gets killed except for her. So Julia gets killed. The husband gets killed, and then Julia finds the Le Mans configuration.
Kirsty finds it.
Kirsty finds it. That's her name. That's the daughter, Kirsty. She ends up with the Le Mans configuration. I think she opens it, and she's greeted with a bunch of Cenobites, of which Pinhead is one, but by no means the main one. He's one of... He's
clearly the leader, but he's not particularly... more of a,
He's the main one in the sense that Rachel's the main character of Friends.
Yeah,
which
and I'm the main guy in this podcast,
Yeah, exactly. And she's greeted with these Cenobites, and they say, hey, you opened the Le Mans configuration, we're going to take it to hell now. And she goes, hold on, you actually let a soul escape, my Uncle Frank. You took him, now he's back. And they're like, what? That's impossible. And she's like, well, how about this? I get you, Frank. You spare me from, trade off the one that got away for her life. So she manages to make that happen, but the Cenobites still kind of want her, but then she just escapes, and that's kind of the end of the film.
Yeah, fuck. We've got
that's all you
10
need to
of
know.
These things to talk about.
And we're 17 in. Oh, no. This is going to be so long.
Basically, to put it simply, a guy comes back from the dead, and his mistress wants to fuck him, so she keeps finding more blood so that he can become human again and have sex with her.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I should have said that. You should have stepped in.
Now, AJ, what did you think of this film?
I liked it in the way that you're kind of interested in that vaguely attractive goth girl in your high school, year 10 class.
Do you mean?
I was curious, and I wanted to know more,
but I feel like I wouldn't be able to keep up.
Yeah. I feel like I wouldn't make her happy.
Right.
So
well, nothing can. She's a goth girl.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of how I felt about this film. I was like, yep, this is cool. I don't know if I like it, but I admire it, maybe, or I see what the point is.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I liked it necessarily, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah. So I can think kind of the selling point of the film is it goes all out, and more so than Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, it's very gory. This is more splatter than slasher. So you've got hooks going into people's skin, and it's not realistic, but it looks visceral, the imagery of their skin being ripped off by these rusty hooks.
And they say come to daddy a lot.
Yeah, they do. That's true.
So the Rotten Tomatoes score for this film, what would you guess it would be around?
It's 30.
You reckon that low?
No. I did read it. As I said, last film franchise Fortnights, the app I use to watch these films actually shows me the score.
It's 68 with critics.
Okay, yeah.
And 73 with audiences.
Yep, that's... Yep,
yeah,
no complaints.
Apparently it did divide critics upon release. Melody Maker called it the greatest horror film made in Britain, but Roger Ebert, probably the most famous film critic of all time, called it a bankruptcy of imagination.
Oh,
and he also described it as a look up and see what's happening film, which I kind of felt with a lot of these films that you just go on your phone, just look up and be like, oh yeah, okay, and then...
No, totally, man. One of the middle ones is I think maybe I can't remember the titles enough, but that's accurate. They are a look up and catch up. Okay, that's what's happening. Don't need to pay any more attention. They're not particularly compelling. It's more just all right, what's happened next?
Yeah. But yeah, and I mentioned as well that it was made in Britain, but you might have noticed that it's they've all got American accents.
A lot of them are trying to do American accents.
Well, actually, it was filmed in Britain with British accents, but they thought to give it a wider appeal, they overdubbed everyone with American accents.
Yep, totally.
And but apart from Pinhead, because I think they wanted him to have a British accent and sound more regal,
like a regal, yeah,
kind of thing. Because in the Freddy vs. Jason, if you've been a fan of us for a long time, I did talk about in Freddy vs. Jason episode that there was the fight was going to take them to hell at one point, and Hellraiser and Pinhead would be there, and he would be like. And I was like, gentlemen, and I was like, I don't know what he sounds like, but he would have said, gentlemen, what are we fighting about? But now that I've seen the films, it's more like, gentlemen, what are we fighting about?
Yeah. Are we going film by film through this?
Yeah.
So do you have a section where we talk about Pinhead as a character?
Yeah. I mean, we can do it now, because it's kind of like, he then goes through all of the films.
Okay. All I'll say is that, like, if Jason is the strong silent type, and Freddy is the wild card. Pinhead is the
brains.
Yeah, he takes himself very seriously. He does. I don't think he makes any kind of quips. He talks in very old English. Things are very important to him.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I like
that.
No,
it's cool. I'm glad.
Yeah. But by the 5-6 film mark, I was like, I actually really like Pinhead.
Yeah, totally.
You mentioned as well Pinhead, not the as iconic in the first film as he thought.
He's not even the first. He's not even the last to die. Like, that's what got me.
Right.
Is that Kirsty I die in quotation marks. When Kirsty's escaping the Cenobites, he's like number 2 or 3 to go, and then there's still more after him that she has to banish.
Well, so in the film, he's the leader of 4 Cenobites, as I mentioned. There's himself, Chatterer, a female one who was nicknamed Deep Throat by the crew because she has like her throat is like opened up, but she's never actually got a name. She's just the female Cenobite, because Deep Throat's kind of sexual. And the other one, there's a big fat one, and his name is Butterball, which makes this our second franchise which has a character whose name is or is based on the word Butterball.
I'm covering my eyes with my hands right now because that's so funny.
Butterball and Chatterer originally had dialogue, but they actually couldn't talk through their makeup, so they gave the dialogue to the female and Pinhead, which kind of helped put him a bit more into the forefront.
Right.
And Pinhead as well. He's called Priest in the early drafts of the script, but in the shooting script he's called Lead Cenobite. Apparently, Clive Barker actually hates the name Pinhead. He thinks it's undignified, and he made a comic in 2011, a Hellraiser comic, and he's referred to as Priest in that, and he's also said that he has a true Cenobite name, which will be revealed at some future date in some future project.
Right. No, Pinhead's not his actual name. It's the same way the smoke monster was called Smokey in Lost.
Yeah.
Like, it is undignified. I don't think he'd go by Pinhead if he had a say in it.
It is used in the franchise a couple of times.
Yeah, but it's always... Yeah, it's like derogatory.
Who are you calling Pinhead? Do you remember, and other than Come to Daddy, could you tell me what the most iconic line of this film is?
No.
Any guesses?
Go to hell?
No.
She says that when she banishes them, she goes, go to hell! And it's like, I think this was the part you're supposed to cheer.
Yeah. At the end, there's Frank, who's wearing his brother's skin.
Right.
He's got all the chains pulling his face apart, so it's like completely warped before it's ripped apart. And she says something to you, and do you remember what he says in response?
No.
He says, Jesus wept.
Yeah.
And that's like oh my God, chills down my spine kind of line.
Really?
I don't think I got it.
Well, Jesus Wept's been kind of ruined for me. Do you remember that episode of Community where the dean is trying out VR and he just keeps crying, Jesus wept?
Yeah, man.
So that's kind of what I associate with that phrase. It's a verse in the Bible, but I associate it
it's the
more
shortest
with the
verse
dean.
in the Bible, I believe.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so apparently that wasn't in the script. It was suggested by the actor. The scripted line was, fuck you.
I kind of like that better. Not to trot on like the kind of theatrical nature of the dialogue in this film, but it would have been a nice cut through the tension of it, I guess. But maybe not.
Yeah. So Pinhead. Oh, we should mention as well. Pinhead's played by a guy called Doug Bradley. So it's like in the same way Kane Hodder is Jason, Robert Englund is Freddy. Yeah, so apparently he was offered to either play Pinhead or one of the movers at the very start of the film, and he was like, "Oh, I should play one of the movers because I'm just starting as an actor. People should be able to see my face." So he was like, almost turned it down to play like a 5-second role.
Wow, amazing.
But yeah, now like, I mean, his face isn't necessarily iconic, but like a version of it is.
What kind of ultimatum is that? Yeah, you can be in our film. We were really impressed with your audition. We'll give you a choice. You can either be an unnamed character who serves nothing really to the plot, or literally like the face of the film. What would you rather be?
Yeah.
So the poster for this film as well is Pinhead, and it says like, he'll tear your soul apart and stuff. So was that the original poster? Or was it like... Yeah. It was? Interesting. So even from the get-go, I thought it might have been like a Stewie Griffin situation where he was just the most loved by fans character.
Yeah, well, I think it's upgraded. It's a bit of that, but it's also like, if you were created like looking at those at the like characters, and also like you have to remember that these posters are like submitted to the MPAA. And it's like, if you're having the Cenobite, like you can't have any of the Hook pulling people apart. You can't have any of the skinless imagery. Like Pinhead, kind of like is shocking imagery, but he's the least offensive looking of the Cenobites
for sure. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so Doug Bradley took the role, and then apparently at the rap party, he was real upset because no one was talking to him, and he thought he got along real well with everyone. And then he later realized that no one recognized him because no one had actually seen him out of his makeup.
I'm going to look up what he looks like now because I don't even know. What's his name?
Doug Bradley.
Bradley. Cool.
So the video release I was reading had just a couple more like funny bits of behind the scenes trivia. The video release had a home shopping network show at the end of it, where merchandise from the movie could be purchased, and it was hosted by like some old lady who said she was a big fan of the movie. So you like buy random shit.
That's awesome.
And also, I just thought the story was real funny. So the opening sequence originally featured the Butterball Cenobite reassembling Frank's mutilated face on the attic floor using actual eyes, a tongue, and pulped flesh from a butcher's shop. Once this decision was made to emphasize Pinhead and press materials, so... there you go. Okay. Doug Bradley was brought back, and a new scene was shot featuring Pinhead reassembling a prosthetic face. Simon Banford, who plays Butterball, was never told that they were doing this, and for years he would tell fans at horror conventions that the brief shot included in the film of a hand piecing Frank's face together was taken from the scene he filmed. It wasn't until the 2010s, during a making-of documentary, that he found out it had been entirely cut and reshot. So he thought, they just cut my scene, but they still used my hand. He didn't realize they reshot. Right. And also...
He's the Eric Stoltz of Hellraiser.
Yeah. And also, an interesting piece of trivia I got from IMDb. The word Cenobite means member of a monastic community. 0 of 2 found this interesting.
Monastic?
Yeah, monastery.
All right. Okay. Cool.
All right, so... Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, 1988. Save your comments. We are going to talk about titles a lot on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So this was directed by Tony Randall. The story by Clive Barker on this one. So he didn't write the script, but he wrote the story.
What year was this?
88, next year.
Right. So this film, it continues immediately on from the first film. So it's following Kirsty, who's now kind of in a mental asylum because no one believes her. And to put it briefly, I think Frank's trying to come back, and so is Julia, and it kind of switches the roles of that. Like Julia gets Frank's role from the first film, so now she's wanting to like rise from the dead.
And there's one of the fucking grossest things I've ever seen in a film.
What was it?
When she comes back and she's skinless, and they like wrap her up in bandages, and then like the doctor like makes out with her,
Yeah,
and like
And he's
puts
got,
his hand up her skirt.
Yeah.
Fuck,
Yeah,
man,
that's
so
gross.
unsettling.
So it all culminates in Kirsty and another one of the patients venturing into hell to like banish Julia for good, and Pinhead's there.
Sure. What do you think this got with critics?
Lower than the first.
Yeah, 54% with critics, 58% with audiences. What do you think of it?
I didn't hate it. It was just more of a extension of the first one, and I was like, it doesn't do anything wrong as a sequel.
Yeah.
It's just
like it could be a 3-hour movie with the first one, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It
kind of feels like the belated last act of the first film.
Yeah. It's like you could cut some stuff out and make like a 2-hour film that kind of covers everything. But yeah, this was included on Roger Ebert's most hated films of all time list.
Wow. I did not care for these movies.
I don't really have anything to say about this film. And like, in the interest of moving on, like, I don't know if we should dwell on it. I'm sorry if Hellbound Hellraiser 2 is your favorite Hellraiser movie, and you wanted to know what we thought about it, but it's such a when
you watch 10 movies in a franchise, man, like we've prided ourselves on not really taking notes, because the way I think of it, if I take notes, this podcast would be even longer. So, but the catch-22 of that is I don't remember what I thought of Hellbound Hellraiser 2 as much, but that's okay. It's fine. It's a good chaser to the first film.
Yeah. The only thing I do want to say about this film, though, is the Cenobites apparently all have like elaborate backstories that were never really explored in the films, but Clive Barker created in his mind, and he wanted it to be clear to the audience that they were once human, which is explored more in the next film.
That is explored more. You're right.
But
is that what? Oh, that is what Doug Bradley just looks like. Would just be the human version of Pinhead, right? Yeah.
So, and this was supposed to foreshadow Frank and Julia's corruption by lust, with Julia becoming the ultimate iconic villain of the series. However, after the first film, Pinhead became so beloved that he just became the center point.
Right. Yeah, because it's interesting, isn't it? I'd say with the first two films, if they had stopped there and someone was like, "Oh, what is the main like horror hook? What's the main monster in the two Hellraiser films?" You'd say, "Oh, it's the people without skin." Like they're the kind of like iconic parts of it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, should we move right along?
Yeah. No, please.
So next we had Hellraiser 3: Hell on Earth. Came out in 1992, directed by Anthony Hitchcox. Clive Barker was executive producer on this one, so it was like Clive Barker presents Hellraiser 3: Hell on Earth.
Yeah.
What's this one about?
Oh, jeez. Pinhead's back, but he's like part of like a frozen totem pole.
Yeah.
So he's like a rock face, and he's like compelling other people who have the Le Mans configuration to do his bidding, and he like kills several people, and the main character's like a reporter named Joey, and she's a girl named Joey, as in Joanna, and she is like trying to figure out what's going on with the whole shit going on. Anyway, it ends with like basically everyone she has come to know of the film are turned into Cenobites. And she learns even more about Pinhead's backstory, and she meets the once human version of Pinhead is separate from
and he fought in like Vietnam.
Yeah, and so the ghost of Pinhead's past like visits her and is like, hey, you actually need to stop this from happening. So with his help, she like lures Pinhead into this dream state dimension where the two of them manage to defeat the monster that Pinhead has become.
Yeah.
Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, it's good. And what did you think of it?
So from here on out, my opinions of these films aren't necessary to know in order to talk about them. I think I'll say right up here that I think the first one is my favorite. I don't know. Maybe it just whatever. Like, I enjoyed watching them. It's weird. I've never been so ambivalent but passionate about a series before. I didn't hate this one. I thought it introduced some clever ideas. It was cool that they kept reinventing how to show Pinhead and have Pinhead be in the film in different ways. I thought that was cool. The part that really made me like crack up was towards the end when Joey is running away from Pinhead. She runs into a church and she runs up to the priest, and it's like an empty church except for the priest. And she's like, oh, a demon's after me. And first of all, the priest goes into it like, oh, well, demons are actually like metaphorical, you know? This is a Catholic church. They do not believe that demons are metaphorical. I'll tell you that you would never catch a priest saying that these it's great though, because when he basically, it's a setup because he tells her demons aren't actually real, and then Pinhead enters the film, enters the building, and she turns around and points at him and goes, then what the fuck is that? And it's like a real kind of cathartic moment. But then he like chains up the priest, or nearly kills the priest, and then he stands at the podium of the church and stigmatizes his own hands and stands like, you know, with his arms outstretched as Jesus was on the cross, and goes, I am what I am. And it just made me crack up, because if you could, it's like it was designed in a factory to make my dad not want me to watch it. Like, it's like that they had a list of all the things that my parents would turn off a movie when I was young, and like, it's not enough that the creature is from hell. He has to try and take the place of Jesus as the and like proclaim himself as Lord.
Yeah, I would say this is probably one of my favorites.
Okay.
I without being able to tell you why necessarily, I just remember really enjoying this one while I was watching it.
I think this was my most look up and see what's happening one. And maybe that is something
you looked up the most. Yeah, so a couple of things about this film. At one point it was going to take place in ancient Egypt.
Oh, cool. Do that movie.
And at one point, Peter Jackson was going to direct it.
Of course, because of the splatter stuff. Yeah, no, it does feel like early Peter Jackson's style.
Yeah,
is kind of what these films are. So no, that makes sense. Yeah.
But also we haven't mentioned this yet, but there's a sex scene in every single one of these films.
Yep.
And like explicit sex scenes.
And you were messaging me leading into the final one, and you're like, oh, there better be a sex scene in it. And in the final movie, there is just enough of a sex scene to be able to call it a sex scene. Like it just crossed the line into being like, yes, this is a sex scene. Whereas like ones before it had like explicit, like full on. I don't know if
there's one that's kind of, it's a non-explicit kind of doggy style thrusting.
Yeah.
And it's kind of artfully shot, but the rest are like real fucking intense. This is one of the ones that's real intense. Because there's a sex scene. It's the guy's on top, and they're both fully nude. But apparently the actress objected to being topless, so they were like, all right, how do we fix this? So they just had the actor have his hands completely covering her breasts.
Yeah, but
like,
it kind of just looks like he's
them.
Like kneading dough to make bread. Like,
it
doesn't...
It was real intense. I was like, why?
It's worse than just being topless in the film.
Yeah, yeah, that's my point. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, she's like, oh, I don't want to show my nipples. And they're like, all right, well, then we're going to have someone, like, kneading the shit out of them.
No, fair enough.
Yeah.
So... this is also... Is this the first time that he's called Pinhead in a film?
Yes, it is. First time Pinhead's called Pinhead.
And that's from Joey before she sends him to hell, back to hell.
And it makes sense in the context because it's like she's making fun of him.
Yeah, exactly. She's making fun of him. She's like, go to hell, Pinhead, or whatever she says, something like that. And it's also, you do see, for those hanging out for the Kirsty connection, you do see Kirsty very briefly in like a videotape of another asylum where she's been sent since since the second film. So that's kind of sad, but maybe we'll hear from her again.
Maybe we will. Also, IMDb trivia here. The word Cenobite means member of a monastic order. 3 out of 3 found this interesting.
So this time they did find it interesting.
Oh.
Different strikes for different folks, I guess.
Yep. All right, so that's the third one. We're just blitzing through them now. Next up came Hellraiser Bloodline. This came out in 1996, and this was directed by, and if you follow our Instagram, you might have seen this already, it was directed by Alan Smithy.
Yep.
And AJ, do you want to say what is interesting about that director?
Sure. Alan Smithy's not a real person. Alan Smithy was the pseudonym directors gave when they were ashamed of a movie they'd directed.
Yeah.
And this is the first time I've ever seen it actually in a film.
Yeah. Yeah. I was actually pretty interested reading about this. So the film's credited director is Alan Smithy. But so yeah, like you said, it used to be the pseudonym you could credit if you didn't want or couldn't be credited for whatever reason. But it was formally discontinued in 2000.
Right.
So like this was one of the last films to do it properly. But I think there are still a few films with it, but there's like guild things with it.
Right. Of course.
Actually, I can tell you. Honestly, I'll tell you what the last film to like fuck it up was. But anyway, the DGA, Directors Guild of America, could if the director could prove to the guild panel that they were not able to exercise creative control over the film, they could, use Alan Smithy. But once they gave you that, you weren't allowed to discuss the circumstances of why it's been credited, and you're actually never allowed to acknowledge that you directed it.
So do people know who directed the film?
Well, yeah, they do, but it's like these things come out, but it's like you're actually not allowed to speak about Directors Guild. But yeah, so the official poster film has no credits at all because they didn't want the Alan Smithy name reflecting poorly on the film, so there's just no credits in it.
Who did direct it?
What happened was Joe Chappelle was the... So, wait a second, let me get this. So Kevin Yeager directed it, but then Joe Chappelle finished it. So there's 2 directors on it. So Joe Chappelle was the first choice to direct her, and in fact he only agreed to do the 6th Halloween film, which he directed, The Curse of Michael Myers. He agreed to do that one if he could do this one, but apparently that had a really troublesome production, which we might find out about at a future time on this podcast when we cover the Halloween franchise. But he ended up declining to direct this film eventually after not enjoying the troublesome production of that one. But the original director of this one, Kevin Yeager, quit Bloodline, and so there was changes made behind his back and whatnot, and so they brought Joe Chappelle in, but there wasn't enough money or time in the budget to reshoot enough of the film so that he could be the credited director, because Directors Guild rules state that you have to direct a certain amount.
Yeah.
To get, and so that's what happened with Ron Howard reshooting heaps of Solo.
Yeah.
He had to redirect. He had to, do a certain amount.
Cool.
It's interesting there.
So the this is Hellraiser Bloodline. So it's less a case of the director being ashamed of the film and more a director not being able to like.
Yeah, well, it was a director left because he was ashamed of the film, and then the other one wasn't allowed to do enough work on it that he could be counted as a director.
So neither necessarily were like credit it to Alan Smithy. It was just that's how it had to be.
Yeah, but the Alan Smithy name apparently was discontinued because there's a film called Burn Hollywood Burn, an Alan Smithy film, which is Eric Idle plays a director called Alan Smithy who creates a film that he's not proud of, but the only pseudonym he's allowed to use is his own name. And apparently it's like the movie is like fucking terrible, and it's like got like 3% on Rotten Tomatoes. And they couldn't use the name after that because it became too widespread.
Okay. All right. So this film is... we're getting into some nice little sequel tropes by this film, because this is Hellraiser in space. I would have thought we'd get a few more sequels in before we resorted to space. But no, this is set at least probably some fraction
It's
of
in
it.
the year 2127.
Yeah, but it's some fraction of it is set in space, and the rest is set back in time. So it does the Jason X thing where this is actually the furthest we've seen in the Hellraiser timeline.
Yeah, chronologically, this film is last.
Yeah, and so basically, there's a dude on a spaceship, and he's using like a robotic, kind of like isolated chamber to unlock the Le Monde configuration, so that all the Cenobites come out, but they're trapped in like this one little room. But just as this happened, like the space police show up, and they are like, "Hey, not allowed to do this." And so the guy who did it talks to the main police lady and tells her the story of the Le Monde configuration, where we go back to the 1800s, I think.
1797.
And we see his great ancestor, played by the same actor. Was it? Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and he makes the puzzle box as a commission as he's a toy maker. So he makes this. He's paid to make this box by like a cultist whose goal is to open up the gates of hell. So that's part of the movie. Then we also go to like present day, as in 1996. Yeah. And we see the ancestor in between the two guys, also played by the same actor, who like is haunted by the kind of Assassin's Creed-y genetic memories of being responsible for this, and goes head to head with Hellraiser, that's not even his name. Pinhead, and then we go into the future again, after we find out what happened there, and the ancestor in space and the police cop, everyone is picked off in the spaceship, but they defeat Pinhead and the Cenobites by locking them in the ship and leaving through a escape pod, and the ship turns into a giant Le Monde configuration, I think implying that he's being locked in there again. But it uses like the direction of the stars and shit like that to become a giant puzzle box. So presumably, if this is the last in chronological order, then Pinhead's trapped forever, as far as we know. So there you go.
What a nice ending. Yeah, so I can't remember if I said it or not, but this is Clive Barker Presents as well, because he was executive producer.
Right.
So this was Adam Scott's first role in a film. And Adam Scott, you guys might know him. He's the older brother in Step Brothers. He's Ben from Parks and Rec. Second podcast in a row where I mention Adam Scott. Actually, no, only if you're a Patreon listener. So
right.
That was in the Josie and Pussycats episode. I mentioned that. So join our Patreon, join the $10 tier, and if you want to hear that podcast.
He talks about Adam Scott in it. It's really good.
Yeah, what else might you know Adam Scott from?
The Secret Life of Walter Mitty.
Yeah, like you'll know Adam Scott if you don't know the name, but you look him up, you'll know who he is.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he enjoyed the film, took it very seriously. Apparently on his first day, his chair was labelled Adam Craig. And he was like, yeah, that was a great introduction to Hollywood. And then he auditioned for the fifth film as well, because he just hoped that no one would remember him. And he was like, I want to try this again. But he ended up not getting the roles.
Right.
So maybe they remembered him. Maybe they just didn't think he was very good.
It is a very un-Adam Scotty role. He's like one of the 1700s cultists.
Yeah, so he's the assistant to the
Yeah. So it's
not real weird.
Yeah, you wouldn't see him take a role like that anymore, unless I guess he was trying to branch out. But is it really branching out if you're just returning to what you did before?
Guillermo del Toro was offered a chance to direct this film.
Man, he would do it great.
Yeah. And also, I've just got here as well, the word Cenobite means member of a monastic order.
I have a question? Yes, no? How many people found that interesting?
It's none yet. It says, is this interesting? And you can be the first to vote.
Click it, man.
So, yeah.
Click no.
Well, I'm just going off the IMDb trivia.
Click no, because we already know this. It's been in the last few.
It's actually not in the second one.
Oh, there you go.
But it was on 1, 3, and 4. So next, that was the last theatrically released film.
Oh, really?
And so now we're in the realm of straight to video.
Yeah.
And the 2000s.
Yeah.
So next we had Hellraiser Inferno.
Yeah.
That came out in 2000. And do you remember, did you take notice of who directed this?
Who directed it?
Scott Derrickson.
How do we know that name?
He directed Insidious and Doctor Strange.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah.
This is his first film.
Nice. Yeah, so the remember in the Mission Impossible episode where we kind of talked about how each Mission Impossible represented the time era it was released in? Like, I feel like the Hellraiser movies kind of do that as well, and none is it more obvious in Hellraiser Inferno, which is the first of, like, this one and the next two make up a trilogy of what is essentially the same film with, like, a different hook. Like, this is they all feel very similar. They all have very similar, like... You know, if I was to describe the Hellraiser series in general, I'd say what's really interesting about it is that, do you remember the Blink episode of Doctor Who? Like one of the...
I've never actually seen it, but I'm aware
right.
of it.
It's one of the only episodes of Doctor Who I've seen, and I loved it and was not at all tempted to watch any more episodes. But that's because the Doctor's barely in it, and it's more like a story that is made possible through the mythology of the Doctor, but not about him. It's very bottle episode-y. And that's what a lot of the Hellraiser films feel like. They feel like a separate film that adopted Pinhead so that they could get funding to make it.
Well, wouldn't you like to know then, this was actually originally a non-Hellraiser script, which was changed to insert Pinhead in the sentence.
We are good. We are so good at this now, dude. We can pick it. Yeah, so Hellraiser Inferno is about is he a detective?
Yeah, it's like a gritty cop drama, film noir.
Yeah.
And it turns out he was the murderer.
Yeah,
like that's it.
There's more to it, man. There's more to it. He's investigating a series of murders.
You finally have an easy one to explain, and you're like, no,
I'll take care of this. He's investigating a series of murders, but he's also got like a very dodgy personal life. Like you see him right at the start, he cheats on his wife, and he explains to you via narration, it's a hard job, you kind of need to let off steam. And then, wouldn't you know it, one of the victims of the serial killer they're hunting is the prostitute he's just slept with. Which is a sex worker. I do apologize. I'm going to be politically correct. No, is it even politically correct? I don't know. Whatever. Anyway,
anatomically correct.
Yeah. And so they so to try and cover his tracks, he like gets rid of a bit of evidence, which means he also has to bring his partner into the fray and be like, hey, I banged this lady and now she's dead, so I've hidden some evidence. You're not allowed to tell anyone. Anyway, it's just a series of him interrogating different people, and then they all end up dead. And at the end, he finds out, as you say, that he was secretly the murderer the whole time, but he didn't really know it. And it's like Hellraiser. It's Pinhead's punishment for him being like a bad person, like, cheating on his wife and stuff like that. It's
like a Saw film.
Yeah. And it ends with him getting pulled apart, like ripped apart by hooks and chains, only for him to wake up next to the sex worker from the start of the movie, and he goes to work, find out that she's dead again, and the resolve of the movie is that he's now trapped in an endless loop of this. It's a good ending. It's a good ending. Like, it's his hell. He's in hell, essentially. And his hell is forever reliving this horrible series of events. The whole thing is filmed with, like, a touch of sepia tone. So it looks like a level from Grand Theft Auto at sunset. The whole thing kind of looks like that. And there are two ways I'd start describing. You could describe all of the movies, but I feel like, especially now that I know that they start straight to DVD, I reckon you could describe all of, if not a lot of the sequels as one of two ways. Either it feels like a non-AAA PlayStation 2 game that you rent out on a Saturday night. It feels like the driver to Grand Theft Auto. Like it feels like the one that's not quite as famous, but it did all right, and you play it, and like Inferno especially feels like you're playing like a point and click detective story. Like there's players and there's developments, and you revisit locations and you acquire objects, and that kind of thing. He opens the Le Mans configuration, by the way. That's how Pinhead gets involved. But the other way I'd describe this movie, and I might be going out on a limb here because this might be something that only I really experienced growing up. But did you ever get out of bed?
No, that's just you did.
You're in bed now. No, did you ever get out of bed in the middle of the night when you were like 11 or 12? I'm talking like 3 to 4 a.m. and sneak into the lounge and turn on the TV and just watch what was on.
Yeah, do you know, actually, I did this one time where I got out of bed and I like started getting ready and I put on SpongeBob, but SpongeBob wasn't on yet, and it's because I'd woken up like 2 hours earlier.
So I'm talking like you haven't even gone to sleep yet. Like you've gotten up earlier, like for the purpose of watching late night TV. I used to be fascinated by this.
Yeah,
the Hellraiser films, they may be a bit too scary to completely apply to this, but definitely in terms of like the plot, they feel like the movie I would turn on at 4 a.m. and it would be
the
on.
tone and the aesthetic, and like the way it's shot, the way it looks, the production value, it's all there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's what I kind of really liked Inferno because it transported me to that kind of mindset. And so the next, I think, 3 or 4 movies I actually watched in 2 parts because I kept falling asleep. But
Inferno is actually pretty good. It's one of those things you can tell it actually kind of has a good director behind it.
Yeah, there's a story that wants to be told in this.
Yeah, it's got no critic score, to be fair, but it's got some good reviews. The general consensus of this film is like it's decent, but its biggest flaw is that it's a Hellraiser movie.
Totally, man. Totally. It reminded me of something like Existenz. Not in any tangible way. I could have just... It's not... The plot isn't similar to Existenz. It just fits that kind of grotty kind of aesthetic and uncomfortable and dirty and slimy kind of storyline being told.
Yeah. It was the first film to have absolutely no input from Clive Barker as well. And also, this is a fun fact, the word Cenobite means a member of a monastic order.
What's monastic mean?
It's like as in like a monastery.
Oh, I find that pretty interesting.
Monastic. I haven't actually looked up what it means. Relating to monks, nuns, or other living religious vows under all the buildings which they live. A monk or other follower of a monastic rule. All right. So that's Hellraiser Inferno 2000. Next, we had Hellraiser Hellseeker, directed by Rick Bota. What's this one about?
Okay.
Kirsty's back.
Yeah. No, I remember that part. Never have I watched a film that felt more like a dream than Hellraiser Hellseeker.
Yeah, it's supposed to, though, like the way it cuts between its scenes and stuff.
Yeah, I guess it's supposed to, but it doesn't make it any easier to follow. Like, this is one of those movies where someone will, like, experience, like, some horrific torture, and then they'll wake up, and you'll be like, oh, it was just a dream, and then they keep living their life in that reality, and then something else horrific happens, and they wake up again, and you're like, wait, so was he dreaming that he was dreaming? Like, it's very tactless in its like, story beats. But no, it's about Kirsty and her like new husband. They're driving and they get into an argument or something, and the car goes into the water. And Kirsty, the guy wakes up in hospital, and Kirsty is now missing. To which I would have said,
presumed dead.
Oh, she just drowned. But they never say, no, we drained the car and couldn't find her body. Like, I'm pretty sure they never say that. So you're left to just assume that's what's happened, because otherwise it's this, like, huge elephant in the room. But no, so he's basically going around trying to piece together, like, memories that he kind of forgot to work out what happened. And in the end, it's revealed that he, much like the guy from Hellraiser Inferno, is also living in a hell, but his hell is that he actually died in the car, and Kirsty's the one who's actually alive.
And Kirsty fucking they were having troubles. He was a dick.
He was cheating on her, I think. That feels right. Yeah. And so she purposely killed him, I guess.
She was pointing a gun at him when they crashed. But also, just to help you visualize this as well, the main character in this film is played by the Vulture from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. If you out there have seen that. And it's one of those, and he's also, if you watch 30 Rock, he's Liz's ex-boyfriend, Dennis. And he should stick to those roles, to be honest. He's great at playing, it's just such a fucking douchebag. But like this false sense of confidence. Yeah. But I actually kind of thought he did an alright job, but I was like, I'm just not going to be able to take him seriously as anything other than the Vulture. So
this film had the most, for me anyway, was the most moment, which was right at the start. One of his many layers of dreams that he keeps waking up from and falling back into is doctors putting a pin in his brain, his exposed brain. And I don't know why, but it got me. I was like, I don't want to see this.
That was fucking gross.
Yeah, and it ended with the Kirsty's walking away from the scene of the accident, and one of the cops is like, oh, hey, we found something. And they hand her the Le Mans configuration, which her apparently did the whole time. Boyfriend or husband had given her as an anniversary present, much to her chagrin, and she sort of takes it and leaves. And maybe she uses it again. No.
I know. We never see her again.
No, that's it. That's it for Kirsty.
But yeah, this is Kirsty from the first film.
Yeah.
Which is weird that they But anyway, this received a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
But 33% with audiences. So, this was originally a non-Hellraiser film.
That's becoming apparent because Pinhead, I don't think I even mentioned him in that plot summary, but he's there.
Yeah. Clive Barker had some input on this one. He influenced the third act a little bit. But that was the last time he had anything to do with any of the films, I believe.
Kirsty, who's the actress who plays Kirsty? Do you remember her name?
Ashley Lawrence.
So in the first 3 films that she's in, she looks exactly like Winona Ryder from the same time period. And I'm not saying she looks a little bit like her. My sister watched some of Hellraiser 2 with me, and she was like, is that Winona Ryder? And I was like, no, but it should be, right? But then in Hellseeker, I didn't even recognize her. So she grew up. It's this weird kind of uncanny valley thing where she aged enough to no longer look like Winona Ryder, but still look like the actress that she is.
Yeah. The stars, apparently, the cast and crew, Dimension Films, who produced them, put the cast and crew under a gag order, which means they're not allowed to speak about it. However, Ashley Lawrence did break the gag order by stating that she'd only been paid enough for the film to make a payment towards a new fridge.
Ugh.
Yeah. Kind of sad, eh?
Yeah.
But then, on the flip side of that, I think that's super interesting. There's an uncredited co-worker who interrupts Trevor and Brett at the water cooler. The director referred to him as the $10,000 extra.
Wow.
Because labour laws of British Columbia forbade directors. They forbid them from directly instructing non-speaking extras. All orders have to go through the assistant director, and Boda told the man to play the scene slightly differently, and so he had to get a few $1,000s extra because he
score payday.
Yeah.
I did actually,
and he put it towards a new fridge.
Accidentally find a piece of trivia about this film as well, Richard.
What is it?
Did you know that Cenobite actually refers to someone from a monastery? I couldn't remember. Damn it! That would have been
the word Cenobite means a member of a monastic order.
Yeah.
Actually, 0 of 1 found this interesting. So.
There you go.
Okay. This one will be interesting. Hellraiser Deader, 2005.
Sorry, could you say that title again?
Hellraiser Deader, 2005.
Deader? That's
Deader,
not a
as in
title.
more dead. This was again directed by Rick Boda. Synopsis.
Yep, so again, it's more or less the same thing, but this time the main character is a female journalist who's known for doing like hard-hitting stories, such as she like becomes a heroin addict or something. Anyway, it starts and her like chief, what do you call like a journalist boss? Editor-in-chief?
Editor?
Yeah. He shows her this videotape that he's come into possession of, which shows like this cult, and they like murder someone, and then they bring her back to life. And the cult are called Deaders. Like a deader is a noun. You are a deader. And so she goes to unveil and explore this cult more. And Pinhead's,
he's there as well.
Yeah.
Because it was an unrelated horror script, which is added.
So was the film just going to be called Deader originally?
I guess. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, what did you think of this one?
You're getting a little bit tired by this point. Because it's like, man, another one.
17% with critics, 25% with audience. I have two fun facts about this film.
Mm-hmm.
One is that the word Cenobite means member of a monastic order. And two, I have literally nothing to say about this film. I could sit here for an hour and I would not be able to come up with anything to say about this film.
I'm trying to think. No, the only thing I can think of is that halfway through, my friend Steven messaged me at like 2 a.m. and asked if I wanted to go get McDonald's with him. And I said, yep.
I saw that on your Instagram.
And so I finished it the next day. That's what happened.
Like,
you put that on the trivia section.
Honestly, you could convince me that I didn't see this film.
I think
I have like because the three of those ones blend together so much, and because it's such a look up and see what's happening film, I'm just like, maybe I fell asleep. I don't know, but I saw the film. I keep a diary of all the films I watch, and it's in there.
So you've got written proof that you watched it, but you don't. You don't retain.
But
the
I
memory.
have no recollection of it. I remember them saying the word "deader" and being like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah. No, I feel like this one had a happy ending, and that's what distinguishes it. But maybe it didn't.
We'll have to watch it again.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Next, the same year we had Hellraiser: Hellworld, which was also directed by Rick Boda. And this was, I'm just going to say Rotten Tomatoes score, 20% critics, 22% audience.
That's crazy that it was directed by the same guy and came out in the same year.
Yeah, and they were actually filmed back to back in 2002.
What do you mean?
You film films back to back.
Right. No,
yeah. But they filmed it in 2002.
You couldn't have two more different sequels than these two films, because Hellworld ends the trilogy of Inferno, Hellseeker, Deader, and then goes to what could only be described as the like other trope of sequels that we're starting to see crop up a bit, at least partially, in a lot of the franchises we watch. And this is the like tongue-in-cheek meta sequel. This is the new Nightmare, or the
Beethoven's Big Break.
Big break of the Hellraiser series. This feels a little bit more like a Scream film than a Hellraiser film, and for that reason, the fact they came out in the same year is baffling, but the fact they're directed by the same creative voice is equally as baffling. So this film is about there's a video game. The video game is called Hellworld, and it's ostensibly Hellraiser. But it's got the Pinhead character in the game. He's a character in the game. He's like a villain in the game, but it's not like someone who looks like Pinhead. It's Doug Bradley's Pinhead. So presumably there is an argument, I guess, that this takes place outside of the continuity of the movies. Anyway, the characters, it starts at a funeral where their friend who played too much Hellworld has died from like a Hellworld related murder or death or something, and so it's a couple years after that, and they get back into the game and are invited to a like convention party for Hellworld fanatics, where you turn up and enjoy various Hellworld related like party antics, and everyone's wearing like masks with their cell phone numbers on it so that you can call them if you want to get freaky with one of them. And anyway, the main characters meet the owner of the house, who's like a massive Hellworld collector, and he ends up killing them off one by one in various different like graphic ways. We find out at the end of the film he's actually the father of the friend they had who died, and he blames them, and so he's killing them off so that as like revenge. And two of the main characters get away from it in the end.
Yeah, so that's basically the plot of the movie. Henry Cavill's in this film.
Yeah, so this is our second Henry Cavill franchise.
Yeah.
There's another little useless statistic for
It's
you.
our second franchise which features Henry Cavill and also features a film which came out this year.
Yeah, that's true. I like rolling multiple statistics into one statistic. It also stars, what's his name? Lance Henriksen?
Yes, Lance Henriksen.
As the father.
Host.
Well, yeah, the father, evil
and
revenge.
He was actually offered the role of Frank Codden in the original, but turned it down for a role in the vampire film Near Dark.
Oh, well, Near Dark's a classic, of course.
Yeah, so a lot of reviews say it's good, but it's not a good Hellraiser film, which is because it was based on an existing horror script called Dark Can't Breathe.
What does that mean? That's so weird.
But yeah, what did you think of this one?
Look, it's very... We experienced this with Beethoven, and that we probably... I'm guessing anyway, we haven't told each other what we think yet, but I'm guessing we enjoyed it more than how good it was, purely because of the time and place that we saw it and the context we saw it in, which was after watching, seven other Hellraiser films, you get to this one that's vaguely refreshing in how it does the story. Like, it's meta, it makes fun of itself. They say Hellraiser in this film for the first time in the franchise. They use the words Hellraisers, which means like someone who plays Hellworld. So I didn't like the ending. So at the end of the film, you find out that the father has
like a shared delusion.
Yeah, it's a shared delusion where he's like drugged them all through various ways, and they're actually all being buried alive, and they all kill themselves except for the two that survive in a way that relates to how we see them die. So the guy who lost his inhaler before he got his head chopped off, like, suffocates because he doesn't have his inhaler in the coffin. The girl who has her head buzzsawed open, like, what did she like pulled out her eyes or something like that? I can't remember.
Yeah.
And then Henry Cavill just dies of fear, which was kind of lazy considering.
Yeah. Yeah. Henry Cavill gets a blowjob in this movie as well. And it's real weird.
Yep, go into that.
Because they're all wearing masks, and she's lifted hers up so it's like perpendicular to her head, kind of
like
thing,
you
almost.
know, lads, when you're getting a blowjay and
but yeah, so that like her head's like she's obviously like going up and down, but then there's like a mask just staring him in the face, going up and down as well, and it looks real weird.
And then it does a scary face.
Henry Cavill's kind of a weird dude. I don't know. I was like reading all the stuff about why Henry Cavill's real shady, and then seeing this film and like watching interviews with him as well. You watch an interview with Henry Cavill, and he says things that he thinks are going to get a huge reaction from the audience, and he does this kind of like eye raise, head wobble, side glance to the audience. If you watch any interview with Henry Cavill, you'll know exactly what I mean. Like, go and you'll be able to point it out. And it's just kind of like, I don't know, something weird about him.
You don't like Henry Cavill?
I don't know. I want to. He's a massive Warcraft nerd as well, apparently. So the MMORPG stuff in this film was very close to home for him.
You're adding him to like the Hall of Fame or Shame of different celebrities that you don't like.
Yeah, I don't know.
I didn't
I
think
like
Henry
him.
would
I
make
just
it
like
there.
he just makes me a little bit uneasy.
Right. Fair enough. So yeah. Is there anything?
Now, AJ, I have a question for you. Oh,
I feel like there's more to say about Hellworld, but I don't know.
yeah, it's actually
It should be the one we talk about the most, but I was just real unmoved by it. And like, oh, okay, so by the way, Pinhead is real in it. You find out at the end that he is actually a living entity because the dad, after he escapes, gets the Le Mans configuration and opens it, and he's like, what the hell? Because he thinks it's just a toy or a prop. And Pinhead turns up and kills him. But yeah, so I guess it does exist in the same continuity, and we can't.
Yeah, this also had there's like the we talked about in Hellseeker, the like thing going into his brain.
Yeah.
This had one real visceral thing for me as well. When one of the guys is holding the Le Mans configuration, but it's like a fake one, and these two like pins come up through his thumb.
Yeah.
And one like pierces through his nail from one side of his thumb to the other. It comes up through his nail, and then one's like just below that. Yeah. That was real like. Ugh.
I think even just describing it explains exactly how you felt.
Yeah. But also, AJ, do you know what the word Cenobite means?
It's someone who's part of a monastic order.
Yeah. So 0 of 3 found that interesting on this film.
Wow. You have a lot of hate in your heart to not find a piece of IMDb trivia interesting, because it's not like it deletes it. And it's not like it downvotes it into like a unseen category. It's just saying, nah, this fact's shit. Maybe it's because whoever was reading it had already read it on the other Hellraiser movies that it mentions.
Yeah. All right, AJ. Here we are. We've gone through 8 films. Here we are at Hellraiser Revelations in 2011, directed by Victor Garcia.
So
what do you have to say about this film?
There's quite a large gap between this film and the last film.
Yeah, 6 years.
Yeah. That's the longest we've seen, I think, in the series so far.
Yeah. There was a 5-year gap.
And I...
Oh, no, there wasn't.
Oh. I didn't know that until watching it. Before watching this movie, I assumed it probably came out in like 2006 or 7, you know? Then I was like, 2011? Oh, that's interesting. And then I immediately thought, that's probably not a good thing. Because this feels like we're in soft reboot territory now. And... this...
Okay, what's it about, real quickly?
So this movie...
It's like a couple of guys go to Mexico.
Yeah.
They find the Le Mans configuration.
Yeah.
And it drives one of them crazy.
Yeah, and he returns
and the other one dies.
Well, that's one half of the story. The other one is he returns back home where the 2 boys have gone missing and visits the family, and kind of they think he's like just survived something, but he's actually come back to torment them for their various sins.
Yeah, because he's wearing the other guy's skin as well.
Yeah. And so they think it's one of the sons, but it's actually the other son. And he tries to kill them all and summons Pinhead, who kills everyone but the sister/girlfriend of the... Like that. So you think it's one guy and it's revealed to be the other. So you think it's the one guy and the main chick is his sister. It's revealed to be the other guy who was dating her. Anyway, that's just for semantics. But so it's like half set in Tijuana and half set in this house. And there's like one survivor, and then it ends. And this film, Richard...
And some of it's found footage.
Yeah, some of it's found footage, but not all of it. They don't want to commit to it. But this film, Richard, is a franchise's worst nightmare. This is an absolute garbage bag of a film. This is one of the worst movies we've watched on this podcast. This is up there, man. This is the other ones I'm like ambivalent about. This one starts and it's just an absolute... it offended me. Like I was talking to a friend about that.
As a Hellraiser fan.
Yeah. Well, it's not like it's an offensive film, but if you like Hellraiser films, you'd be offended by this film. And the reason for that, the main thing is that for whatever reason that I'm sure you'll tell me soon, Doug Bradley didn't return as Pinhead. and they recast him with probably the worst casting decision. They cast like this frumpy kind of chubby dude.
Okay, yeah, honestly, yeah, this is like, stop what you're doing right now and Google Pinhead.
Yeah.
Look at the photos that come up, get that idea in your head. He looks pretty badass, he looks pretty cool. Now search Pinhead Revelations, and you'll see this weird, chubby-cheeked, fucking baby-faced weirdo that we got stuck with in this film.
It is infuriating, and it's just like,
especially now that I've come to respect and really like Pinhead as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's an assault on the senses, and like, so it's just a bad movie as well. Like there are red flags all over it of like, this was made for not a lot of money by people with no experience. Things like, one of the main actors I think he's trying to do an American accent. One of the dads is trying to do an American accent, but he mustn't be American because his accent's all over the place. There's like tangential storylines which I'm not really sure how they connect back to the story in the end anyway. There's things like there's like plot contrivances like yeah, before any of the dangers showed up, they mentioned that they live out in the country, so there's no cell phone reception. And it's like, oh, well, that's very convenient for your housebound horror movie then, isn't it? Like, there's a part where the son who's returned home is like in sort of like a trance state, and he's standing out by the pool, and he's like, they don't want me to be happy. And they're like, what? Who are you talking about? And he looks at them and he goes, the Cenobites. And it's like, is this Scary Movie 3? Is this the kid from Scary Movie 3 who like tells people like ominous ways that they're about to die? Like, it's so, and there's a part, oh God, so they put, the boy comes home, the lost son, one of the lost sons comes home. And they put him to bed, and they're like, the mum's like, I'll make you some soup. So she goes and makes some soup, and she sends the person we think is his sister, because remember, he's an imposter. Remember that. But you think it's still the guy at this point. And they send his sister, who, by the way, she's dressed in a way that, like, you just wouldn't wear that around your family. You wouldn't wear that in for a family night out. It's very clearly like the costume department trying to go for sex appeal. Like, this is our sexy actress. Let's put her in the film. But you just wouldn't wear that around your family. She's not going out or anything. She's staying at home. Anyway, so she enters the room and gives them.
And like, your brother's just gone missing as well.
Yeah, exactly. And your boyfriend. So she enters back into the room, and she gives him the soup, and then there's like a little bit of like flirty tension between them, and I was like, oh. And then he like leans in and like starts kissing her, and he like cups her breast as he's doing it. And I was like, I don't want to watch this. Like, I don't want to watch this movie. Like, it's already, like, offensive as a Hellraiser fan. It's already got all these red flags of like a stereotypical bad movie. And now you're throwing something as, like, uncomfortable as irrevocably incest, like, in there. Like, it is... it made me so upset. I wanted to just turn it off at that point. And you know, like, there are movies that have incest in it and it's fine. Like,
it's fucking hot.
Like Arrested Development, you know, big incestuous plots in that, and it's hilarious. But this just felt less like trying to be creepy and weird, and more just like someone executing some weird fantasy they have. And oh, man. And, you know, at the end of the film, you find out it's actually her boyfriend wearing the brother's skin, but she didn't know that. Like, first, we didn't know that, so we think it is the brother making out with the sister. But then she doesn't know that either, so she willingly made out with her brother. And I think it's just so that she had a sin, so that when he shoots his dad and is holding everyone ransom waiting for Pinhead, that he has, like, because he reveals, like, the dad cheated on the mum and all that kind of shit. And then she's like, oh, and little sister who made out with her big brother kind of thing. And I think that's the only reason it's in there, is so that she has something to be ashamed of. And then, so they go into the Pinhead world, like the chains and hooks world, and he's slowly like. Some of them are already dead by this point, but they get real mad at the bad guy. They're like, "No, you have sinned against whatever, so you're actually gonna go to hell, not these guys." Because he's like, "Oh, I thought we could trade," and they're like, "There is no trading." Which I don't know why you would assume you could trade with a demon, but whatever. Anyway, like you know what I mean? Like I wouldn't assume that would work. He seems so confident that this will work that I'll trade my family members for my own soul. But that doesn't work, so they're about to drag him to hell, and then the dad, the still alive dad, pulls out a gun and shoots him, and he's like, I'm not letting, I'm gonna take care of this. And the faux Pinhead is like, "Oh, you fool, like the amount of torture he would have suffered for eternity would mean way more than what you have just given him there." And so he takes the still alive mother, as like punishment for the dad, and then I think the dad dies as well, and it just ends with the daughter, the Pinhead telling the daughter like, "Oh, you're being spared. Here's the Lemon configuration. Maybe one day you'll use it." And it ends there with her rolling it around in her hands in her lounge where all her family members being killed, with enough trauma to like put you in psychiatric help for the rest of your life. And it ends there, promising a sequel.
Do you want to know any behind the scenes trivia for this film?
Yeah, man. I'm sure there's a lot.
All right. This is the first time since Bloodline, the fourth film, that a Hellraiser film was written to be a Hellraiser film.
No shit. I could have guessed it wasn't, because it's so... Actually, no, because it involves the drinking blood to come back from the dead aspect from the first film that we haven't seen since then. So,
AJ, would you believe me if I told you that this entire film from start to finish was made in 3 weeks?
Yep.
Because it was. 11 days of that was shooting.
It took 1 week longer to make this film than it took us to watch the entire series and record a podcast on it.
Yeah, man. So, I don't know how much you know about the film industry or our fans out there, but anyone who's familiar with the behind-the-scenes reasoning for Fantastic Four that came out in 2015, or The Amazing Spider-Man, which came out in 2012. These films and Hellraiser Revelations exist because movie studios have to maintain the rights to a film franchise, have to keep producing films in the franchise.
Of course, it's so obvious now. Of course that's why it was made.
So, they had to make one, or they were going to lose the rights, and we'll talk more about this and continue the franchise, but they've been trying to do a remake of the original film since 2006, so they want to keep the rights so they can eventually do that, but they have to keep making sequels. Doug Bradley, as we mentioned, declined to appear. He released a statement. I wrote the whole thing here, but I don't know if I read the whole thing. But basically he said, yeah, everyone knows now they're making a new film. You want to know if I'm going to be playing Pinhead again. I was approached in last week on 16th of August regarding a new Hellraiser film. It's not the remake. It's going to be called Revelations. It's the 9th film. I've had no contact or negotiations from anyone from Dimension Films, but they're just from private discussions with people involved in the project. The ink is barely dry on the script. It has to be in front of the camera in 2 weeks and in the can by the middle of next month. So on this 2 weeks from the 16th of August, it was going to be being filmed and it had to be finished by middle September. So he basically said, I don't know if they're getting someone else to pay Pinhead. I don't know what's happening. We'll find out together. And he did also say that his salary he was offered was the price of a fridge, which is how people measure salaries in Pinhead.
Is that a coincidence, or is he making a
I have
reference?
no idea. But so a guy called Stephen Smith Collins played Pinhead. And the film was released in one cinema, which was for cast and crew and ostensibly open to the public. But also there was some Clive Barker and Douglas Bradley haven't commented on the film. Barker's comments are in response to claims that the film comes from the mind of Clive Barker. He posted on Twitter, "I have nothing to do with the fucking thing. If they claim it's from the mind of Clive Barker, it's a lie. It's not even from my butthole."
Yeah, this is the type of thing, like, this would have been the last film, because the next one, the 10th one, came out this year. So if we had covered Hellraiser when this podcast started, we would have...
when we got Freddy vs. Jason.
Huh?
Or even when we got Freddy vs. Jason, if that was like...
Yeah,
we did Freddy vs. Jason versus...
Revelations would have been the last one we got. And that's depressing to think of, that for a long time, because, 2011 to 2018, this was...
7 years.
Yeah.
Longest gap.
Wow, true. And that was that was it. That's all you got, baby. Like, you got... This is the last Hellraiser film until, as far as you know. So, yeah. Oh.
But, yeah, you look at the pinhead from this film, and it actually looks like something out of like epic movie.
No, this film,
and the production value is very Asylum or
this
date
film
movie.
This film feels like a Saturday Night Live sketch where nothing funny happens. Like it's got that dinner party.
It feels like a parody that just you take out the humor.
Yeah, you know how like SNL sketches are always set in dinner parties. There's so many that are just dinner parties. Like this is set in a dinner party. That's what it feels like. You keep waiting for like I don't know, like who's a SNL alumni?
Kenan Thompson.
Kenan Thompson to come out as Hellraiser, as Pinhead, and be like, "Oh, Jesus!" Like something has gone wrong with this film, and now I know why, and it's as satisfying but equally as disappointing as I thought it would be.
Yeah, I like, this was one of the main reasons, because I was reading about this a few weeks ago, and I was like, I really wanted to see what you thought of the film without knowing anything behind the scenes, or if you'd be able to work it out.
Oh, you can tell some of that. I mean, I just didn't think about it, but watching it, like, because it starts found footage, and I was like, you know what? It's a good idea. Do a like, probably not now, but in 2011, yeah, man, a found footage, like retelling of a classic horror movie. Then that's a good idea. You couldn't do it now, but now it would be like it would be like Skype recordings.
Yeah, screen live.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. So 2 more things about this film. 2 more quick pieces of trivia. One, Nico, the main character guy. His mum and dad are only 2 and 7 years older than him. The actor.
What on earth? That's amazing. That's kind of amazing. Like, I guess he looks young, wouldn't it? It's not the other way around.
And also, the word Cenobite actually means member of a monastic order.
What's a Cenobite?
All right, which brings us to this year, 2018, 2KA18. Hellraiser Judgment, directed by Gary J. Tunnicliffe. What is this one about?
So this one is about a pair of brothers who are detectives. They're 2 brothers. The film's just called 2 Brothers. And they are investigating a serial killer very reminiscent of like the one from Seven. Because he's based in like biblical ideas, but instead of the 7 deadly sins, he's killing people after the
10
Commandments. And this like new hotshot cop joins them, and she's a lady cop, and they're like, we're gonna find this killer, and then parallel to this story, not Pinhead, but like Pinhead's little minion. Does he have a name? I want to call him something.
The Auditor.
The Auditor. So the Auditor...
And he's played by the director as well.
He's played by the director. Do you know what? I wondered if Stephen Smith Collins was the director of Hellraiser Revelations, because I couldn't think of another reason why they would cast that guy. So the Auditor, who is like a bald dude with like big, round Final Fantasy anime black sunglasses and like scars all over his face that almost looks like he's been patched together from other pieces of skin. So he basically lures people, like bad people, into his house, and he interviews them and writes down all their sins, and then this big fat dude comes out, he's called the assessor, and he eats your sins, the paper on which your sins are written, and then he vomits into a trough which 3 topless women drink and tell you whether or not the person being assessed is guilty or not guilty. This happens at the start with like a pedophile, and that guy's then sent to be cleaned, where a bunch of old naked ladies like lick him, and then I can't remember the name of the last guy, but he's like dressed in like a gimp suit, and he comes in and tears him apart. And it's basically like, as the film's title suggests, it's like a judgment. And so one of the cops investigating the 10 Commandments killer goes and winds up at this house and is judged for it. It definitely feels like 2 movies stuck together. It does. Yeah. And anyway, towards the end of the film, you discover that one of the brothers is actually the serial killer, and he lures the female cop into like this house where he reveals it to her, then he tries to kill her. And you think, spoilers, she's not dead, but you think she is. And then invites the brother over, and he comes along with the killer's wife, who's been having an affair with the brother. And basically, what does he do? Does he summon Pinhead?
Yes.
Pinhead shows up again. And again, the brother's like, take these guys, they are adulterers, and they want to take the brother, obviously, because he's a serial killer. And so then an angel shows up and goes, actually, no, the adulterers, we don't care about them, but the killer is actually doing more for heaven, because he is actually putting so much evil in the world that people are turning to the good, which is heaven. And again, we're in that territory where it's like, how can we piss off AJ's parents the most? Let's make heaven corrupt. Like, and so she convinces Pinhead to leave the killer alive, and so he does. And then when time starts again, or whatever, they return to the mortal realm, the female cop you thought was dead, immediately shoots the brother, killing him, and the angel gets real mad at Pinhead and is like, oh, you did that on purpose, and then he like hooks the angels and kills her. And then he's like, well, what was she going to punish us with? Eternal suffering? Like, we live for suffering. And the auditor's like, he's got a German accent, by the way. And he's like, oh, but I'm not going to do a German accent. But do not whip me. I'm full of chocolate. No, he's like, don't. He basically says, but that's the angel that you just killed was the angel that banned Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. Banished. They're banned. Do not let these people in.
Sorry, you're not on the list.
And he's like, so what if we are just banished? And then the kind of last shot of the film is a humanized Pinhead as like a bum on the street screaming that he wants to go back to his life as Pinhead.
And you mentioned as well, you messaged me today, there's a post-credit scene of this film, which I missed.
Yeah. So the post-credit scene, it goes to Berlin, Germany, and these 2 Mormons bike up to a door, and they knock on it, and they're like, Guten Tag, and they say, like, can we tell you about the good news of Jesus? And then it's revealed that, then their faces drop, and they, like, enter the building, and then it cuts to the auditor, and he's like, 2 at once, and it's not even a Tuesday. Which, like, ignore the fact that that's a stupid line.
Yeah.
But it's also like, I thought the auditor was banished to the mortal realm. It's apparently not. So I guess it's setting up a sequel, but not really.
All right, interesting. What did you think of this one?
The start, the first 15 minutes, I was like, this is wonderful. Like, this is schlocky, and like they're chewing it. They're enjoying what it is. Because it starts with the auditor torturing this pedophile, and I was like, this is great, man. This is it's
like that, setting up the rules with the vomit and the naked ladies.
Yeah.
It's kind of Human Centipede-y.
Yeah, totally. But it just sets up like a really like it doesn't take itself seriously, I think. So it feels very fun. You know, it's schlocky. Schlocky's the right word. And so it started, and I was like, this is all right. Like, I'm kind of impressed with this. And then it very much goes off the rails, and it kind of just becomes like a fart in the wind of a movie. Like I kind of was interested in the two brothers and the female cop storyline investigating a serial killer. So I was like, all right, let's see where this goes. But then when the brother who's revealed at the end to be the killer winds up in the auditor's clutches, like, it's just him for like 35 minutes. You don't return to the other characters at all. So there's again, there are red flags of like that kind of reek of like inexperienced filmmakers, I guess. One thing that I noticed is that when the investigator, the cops, they go to the house of the pedophile from the start because they're, you know, following the breadcrumbs, and the landlady's like, if he's in there, then he's sitting in the cold and dark because he hasn't paid his rent for 2 weeks, so I shut off power. And so they enter the building and and then then a scene later, he's like, I'm going to return to the house because I had a hunch about something, which is kind of like pretty contrived because I was like, why didn't you just do that before? But anyway, he enters the room and he turns and yells off camera, thanks for turning the power back on, and then flicks the light switch. And you don't see the landlady, you don't hear the landlady, and it's totally like, oh, we want him to return here, but he kind of needs the lights on, but we don't want to pay this actress to come back. Oh, just have him walk in and yell off screen, you know. So it's stuff like that, which feels very.
Do you know what? I'm
veiled.
So glad you mentioned the landlady.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you noticed in the opening credits, the first two credited actors are the brothers. Mm-hmm. The third is Heather Langenkamp, who you might recognize as the main character from Nightmare on Elm Street. Quite a big get for the series.
Yeah, totally.
She plays the landlady. She's in the film for 45 seconds in one scene, and she's wearing old lady makeup.
Just give her a different character, right?
Or just cast someone else.
Or don't just have the landlady not be that old.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. So that there's that aspect of it. I was enjoying it up until he gets pulled into the house and he ends up having like nightmares and brings the brother to the house, but of course it's cleaned out and stuff like that. I really didn't enjoy the twist that he was the killer. I just feel like you'd know.
I've seen it before.
Yeah, and you'd know it by that. Like there's so much going into it that they've written up and studied, and the way that the brother works it out, the other brother works it out, is that he says to him, "Oh, God judges the wicked and the blessed." I don't know, whatever. He quotes a Bible verse to him, which is from a book of the Bible, where called Ecclesiastes, and Ecclesiastes means what's the word? The name of the killer is like the processor or something like that. Which means teacher, and Ecclesiastes means teacher. Therefore, the other brother works out, oh my gosh, my brother's the killer. Richard, Can you imagine if there was a serial killer called like the Mechanic, and then I was talking to you about something, and I mentioned like the Spanish word for mechanic, and then you went, AJ's the killer. Like it's a bit of a stretch, isn't it? Like, I also didn't like that the like final showdown. They jump through hoops to get to the same result that you would only have to jump through one hoop to get through. So like, if you want to kill off the characters, you didn't have to then trick Pinhead into doing all the work. You did, like, I don't know, it was stuff like that. That's just real average. So much better than Revelations, a step forward, but by no means a return to form.
A good film.
Yeah.
50% with critics. So
yeah, that's fine.
Highest in a while. We get a new Pinhead again in this film. A third actor, and he's slightly redesigned. The director's a massive Doctor Strange fan, so the leather in Pinhead's robes has the Eye of Agamotto crafted into it, which is the series' second Doctor Strange connection.
Yeah, true. The guy who plays Pinhead's fine in this.
I actually thought he did a pretty good job.
Yeah, it's Pinhead's quite a blank canvas in terms of, like, he just looks like a normal guy, but he has pins in his head, you know? Yeah. And the problem with
you want
Revelations...
like a Peter Cushing kind of...
Yeah, totally. And the problem with Revelations is they cast someone who looks specific. You could describe Stephen Smith Collins, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas this other guy who plays him is, you know, a tall white dude, skinny white dude, and that's enough.
Yeah. So, Gary J. Tunnicliffe is the director of this film. Mm-hmm. He wrote Revelations. But
unforgivable.
He wrote and directed this film. But he was the special effects artist for all of the Hellraiser films since Hell on Earth, the third one. But he wrote Hellraiser Revelations. He wrote Judgment, and then later on removed all references to Hellraiser to try and make it as an indie film in 2013. He actually started a Kickstarter, which was cancelled because no one would really back it. He cancelled it after making 4% of its goal. And if you find like a cache of the page, it's really sad to read because because it was like Judgment, a horror film like no other, and there's like a trailer for it, and he's like, hey, I thought we put something together really special, but it didn't work out, and that's fine. And it's like, oh my god,
that's what would happen to me if I started a Kickstarter, dude.
Yeah, but then Dimension was about to lose the rights again, and unless they made another film, so they made. So he was real passionate about this film, and they brought back his first one with all the Hellraiser references, and they were like, okay, you have to pitch us something else. So he made one called Enter Darkness to prove that he was capable of coming up with other ideas than Judgment. But eventually they said, fine, touch up your script, submit it again, but if we hate it, you have to direct Enter Darkness for free. And it's like, fuck these, like...
You're not allowed to do that. What kind of deal is that? That's like, if he agreed to that, then just get him to say, no, we don't like it, you have to direct this film for free. I'm amazed that that's not what happened.
Yeah. And he did try to get Doug Bradley to return, but he declined after learning that he'd need to sign a non-disclosure agreement to read the script. Because they didn't want him trashing it online. And he was like, no, I'm not going to do that.
No, fair enough. It's written by the same guy who wrote Revelation.
But yeah, they got another. Paul T. Taylor is the guy, and he was impressed by his audition for a different role and gave it to him. Right. And Chatterer is the same actor we've seen before, though, because Chatterer is in this film again. So this film was shot like alongside Children of the Corn Runaway, which is another franchise Dimension has the rights to and has to keep making movies of. But yeah, it was going to be released at the end of 2017 with minimal marketing because they didn't want to get negative publicity. However, Dimension Films ran into a bit of a snafu at the end of last year when Harvey Weinstein got found out for a lot of his stuff. So the film wasn't really a priority for Dimension Films. But it made its way out in February of this year when the company basically needed all the money they could get because no one really wanted to work with Dimension Films anymore.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you were real into Hellraiser, this is an all right return to form. Like, yeah, it's not too bad. It does feel that he didn't smooth out the wrinkles in the fact that it's two different movies stuck together. Like, it almost feels like three different movies stuck together because you've got the detective story with the serial killer, you've got the auditor storyline, and then you've got the Hellraiser stuff they plug back in. So I don't know. The actors kind of look like the other like low budget aspect of it. I feel like the actors, except for the female cop who I kind of have a crush on now, they all kind of look like some people you'd cast for like a student film, like a university film. Yeah. Like, I don't know. That's just another aspect of it that I picked up on, is like no one's like Hollywood. No one looks Hollywood, I guess.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's fair enough. All right. Well,
which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that is unfortunately a signpost of what is probably not going to be a great film.
Yeah. And also, did you have any trivia you found out about this film?
Yeah, something about Cenobites being monks or something like that.
Yeah, I think the word Cenobite actually means member of a monastic order, which I forgot to mention is said in Revelations.
Really?
Yeah, because he says, "Oh, the Cenobites," and then they
yes.
run inside and they go to the dictionary. It's like Cenobite, member of a monastic order, and I was like, ah!
It says here on IMDb like 7 times.
like fucking 10 times. All right, so that's the film. So one thing we talk about a lot on this podcast is the word Cenobite, and it actually means member of a monastic order. Another thing we talk about is titles. We talk about it a lot on this podcast. So the first film was based on a book written by Clive Barker, which was called The Hellbound Heart.
No shit. I didn't know that.
So that was changed because it sounds like a romance movie. But what do you think of that title?
Yeah, I mean, it only kind of vaguely relates to what the movie's about, but
yeah.
So does Hellraiser. Like, I asked you at the start, I was like, what does Hellraiser even mean? And you were like, I know the answer. I mean, I could make up what it means. I guess it means you're raising something from hell, but it just feels
because you were talking about how you wanted to know why it was called this.
Yeah.
And but the film was filmed under the working title Sadomasochists from Beyond the Grave.
It's weird that they know that. I guess they would. They do look like sadomasochists, and that's probably like...
Well, they are sadomasochists.
Yeah, true. Okay.
But yeah, Clive Barker wanted it to be called Hellbound, but a producer suggested Hellraiser instead for some reason. I mean, Hellbound would be a good title for the films.
Yeah, totally.
And at one point, he opened it up to the production team. What do you think it should be called? And a 60-year-old woman suggested it should be called What Woman Will Do for a Good Fuck.
That makes me sad.
Yeah.
But maybe it's true.
One day they'll come to
you. Yeah, okay. No, that's fine. It's
Hellraiser's one of those cool... It's a cool franchise title.
Yeah, and it fits into the theme of both Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street, where the titles... Like, the most accurate would be Nightmare, but only because of the word nightmare. The Elm Street is such a forgotten aspect of that franchise.
Yeah, but in, I think, Freddy vs. Jason, one of the later ones, Freddy says that every town has an Elm Street.
Right.
Which was like a cool...
sure.
It's a cool line because it's like, Elm Street's such a common name that, like, yeah, there is one in every fucking town.
Yeah.
But also, like, Elm Street as, like, a place of being.
Yeah. And Friday the 13th, I feel like if they could go back in time, they'd just call it Camp Crystal Lake. Like, that's the worst one in terms of, like, how that title relates to the story. Like, it's not because it's Friday the 13th that the stuff is happening. They're not even all set on Friday the 13th, you know? So,
there's like 3 that take place on consecutive days.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've spoken enough about that. So the sequel titles, what do you think of those?
There are only really 2 thoughts that I have. Because the sequel titles more or less are like I don't have a problem with like generic sequel titles, you know what I mean? Like, it's like they're not gonna win AJ's award for best movie titles, but they're not like egregious.
Yeah, like Revelations and Judgment are pretty.
Yeah, they're pretty.
Judgment actually fits though.
Yeah,
like
true.
Pretty well.
True.
Revelations is just a fucking dumb title.
So obviously the big sore thumb is Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. That pisses me off because it's so close.
It feels like a mistake.
Yeah, just call it Hellraiser 2 Hellbound, and you're fine. And so that's a bit of a sore thumb, and I feel like it'd be very easy to talk whoever's in charge of these movies to rename it. You know what I mean? It's not an unreasonable thing to ask. But I guess the other main note I'd have is that Hellraiser Deader is the worst title I think I've ever heard. Just the word deader. When you watch it, you learn it's a noun and it has a bit more context. But you don't... Would you watch a movie called Hellraiser Deader? It feels like
looking at the list of films, I was like, oh, so this is where they get silly.
Yeah.
But they don't.
No.
Hellraiser as well. Like, it never stops taking itself seriously.
Except for maybe Hellworld.
Yeah. But even then, it's still like... takes itself like
whereas
true. Like Friday and Nightmare both become very silly.
Deader it's just it feels like you started writing the title and then you got a phone call and so you left and then came back and you're like, oh yeah, that works, because they don't justify why the like cult is called Deader. You know, they're not like they're called this because it's just a bad title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Yeah, we've talked about titles. Now let's get to continue the franchise and see if we can wrap this podcast up because it's going for quite a while. But it's 10 films. What did you expect?
Yeah.
Anyway, so a remake has been trying to be made since the remake itself. It exists somewhere in time. It's been trying to come into existence since it was announced in November of 2006. Pascal Laugier of Martyrs, the French movie Martyrs. It's like one of those horror like, oh my god, it's like Serbian film kind of thing. Right. He was set to direct, but he left because he wanted to make a serious horror film, and the studio wanted it to appeal to teens. So a year later, 2 more directors were announced to write and direct, but it never happened. In 2011, they said they left because they couldn't agree on the script. They wanted one thing and to respect Clive Barker, but the Weinsteins wanted their vision to appeal to the largest audience possible. In 2009, Patrick Lussier and Todd Farmer were announced to write and direct the reboot. They didn't want to do a remake, but wanted to focus on the function and world of the Lament configuration. They also said that if they were going to do a Hellraiser film, it had to be rated R. If they want to do PG-13, they have to get rid of us. A year later, they got rid of them. In 2013, Clive Barker announced that he would personally be writing and directing the remake, and he had made a deal with Bob Weinstein, and Doug Bradley was going to return as Pinhead. In 2017, however, he revealed it hasn't moved forward at all. He had delivered a script in 2015, but he hadn't heard anything until he heard that they were making Judgment.
Do you reckon it was just the same script as the first film? And that's what they're like, we're not going to talk to you, Clive, if you're going to do this.
But yeah, Judgment could potentially get a sequel. It was made to be open. Paul T. Taylor said he'd happily return as Pinhead, but if they want to do a bigger budget with Bradley back, he'll happily step aside. And Doug Bradley has said he would definitely come back for the right time, right place, right motives, and right script. He says that other actors, he doesn't feel like other actors have taken the role from him, but maybe they've just taken temporary ownership. In terms of Hellraiser and Pinhead appearing in other media, there's been a few novels, including 2016's Sherlock Holmes and the Servants of Hell, which is a crossover with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. There's been lots of comics by a few different publishers, and a video game began for the Nintendo Entertainment System, which was going to be the first game where you could save your progress and come back to it later on.
Wow.
And they ended up, this is fucking ridiculous, and go and look this up for what started as a Hellraiser game, what it turned out to be, and what it looks like. So they developed the game for a little bit, and then they got rid of the Hellraiser license and changed the game into the Bible-based Super 3D Noah's Ark. Google Super 3D Noah's Ark and have a look at the cover art and think that this started as a fucking Hellraiser game, and it's like the most ridiculous thing.
All right, I'm Googling it. This looks appropriate for 3-year-olds.
Yeah, it's like, this is what AJ's parents would have loved him to be playing.
Not once they found out that it was once a Hellraiser game.
And then they're like, oh, what's Hellraiser? And they look it up and find all the other shit that you've said.
Wow, that is unreal. Why even mention that it started as a Hellraiser game?
Yeah.
What market are you reaching?
Or maybe people were following the development of the Hellraiser game, and then they're like, what happened to it? And they're like, oh no, it came out. It just ended up being Super 3D Noah's Ark.
I've got the back cover of the game here. I'm going to read the blurb aloud if that's all good.
Go for it, man.
Imagine what life was like aboard Noah's Ark. It's been a long journey. In just a few days, the Ark doors will open and Noah, his family, and the animals will be back on dry land. But the animals have become a bit restless and are out of their cages. Camels, giraffes, monkeys, kangaroos, and more, literally every animal on Earth, and it's like, are wandering throughout the corridors of the Ark. As Noah, it's your job to regain order and get the animals to sleep until you leave the Ark. Your only tool to accomplish this is the food you brought aboard the Ark. Can it be done? You bet. But how? Wow.
And that started as a Hellraiser game. All right, AJ, have you got to continue the franchise?
I do. I feel like this has been pitched before on this podcast, but I've kind of thought more about it now. So it seems to me that there's two factors to consider here. It's never been more ripe to make a horror film in probably the last 30 years, right? Like with Get Out and It and Hereditary, like right now is a time where adults want to see, distinguished horror films. And so that's one thing to consider. The other thing to consider is the kind of recent failure to launch of certain cinematic universes, such as the Universal Mummy Dark Universe, no, not Universal Mummy, sorry, Universal Monsters Dark Universe, and things like that. They released one movie and probably aren't going to make any more. So I reckon you remake these tentpole 70s, 80s horror franchises with the intention of making a cinematic universe, right? So since we've only seen Hellraiser, Freddy, and Jason, those will be the first three, I guess, movies that come out, right? And this big plan.
There's also been an Evil Dead remake.
Sure, yeah. Evil Dead I didn't even think about, but I'm talking like these. I feel like those three are like a triptych of that and Halloween and maybe Child's Play, but I don't know those franchises well enough yet to speak on them. But so this is more than just remaking the films. First of all, you wouldn't be able to just remake them because a lot of the iconography, like, the whole Jason's hockey mask isn't introduced till the third film, and Pinhead's barely the main villain in the first Hellraiser movie. So you gotta kind of tweak them so that they fit each other, and then make a movie of each of these, then do like an Avengers style crossover, whatever. Now, to distinguish this from the other times, I think I pitched this on the Scream episode, so I'm trying to distinguish it from that. So one thing you do kind of see with these launches of cinematic universes is they put a lot of thought into casting. So I was like, okay, if they were going to make a big budget Hollywood remake of those three films, or those three franchises specifically, what A-listers would you cast as Freddy, Jason, and Pinhead? So I've got some ideas. So this might be a bit of a waste, but I was thinking for Jason, you could cast Dave Bautista. Because I was thinking a big guy could probably...
his schedule's going to be free.
Yeah. Well. Could totally carry his own stuff. I loved him in Blade Runner 2049. Jason's probably a fairly easy role for him to play, so maybe there'd need to be like his mask isn't always on and you see him as like the freaky Jason kind of thing. So Dave Bautista is Jason for the Friday the 13th remake. Then for Hellraiser, for Pinhead, I was racking my brain trying to think, who should I cast as Pinhead? And I landed on not the look, but the voice, Adam Driver as Pinhead.
Oh, yeah? Good.
Yeah, because he's got that voice, Imagine this voice telling you about judgment and eternity and hell. So shave Adam Driver's head, put white makeup all over him, put pins in his head. I think he'll look enough like Pinhead, but he'll have the voice, and I almost wonder if that's more crucial than the look.
Yeah, all right, okay. And what about Freddy?
Freddy, this is probably the weirdest choice I picked, but I just thought about it heaps, and this is what I landed on. Adrian Brody as Freddy. I reckon he's got a performance in him where he can play like the comical, sadistic nature of Freddy Krueger.
All right.
So that's my slightly more effort than usual continue the franchise.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll just say, a remake.
Yeah.
It could be a good give Blumhouse the rights, because they're doing a new Halloween film which looks amazing. They're trying to get the rights to Friday the 13th. I know, they just give them all the classic horrors and do good low budget ones. Yeah,
totally.
All right, that's mine. All right, let's do continue the franchise. No, franchise really.
Oh my goodness, that actually was just yours. Was just remake.
Well, yours was so good. I'm no point putting effort into mine.
All right, okay.
All right, franchise roulette. We've got a list of 296 franchises here. I've got a random number generator in front of me. I'm going to hit it, and it's going to tell us the next franchise we're going to be covering with a corresponding one on the list. Here we go.
272.
272, which is...
Let me guess. Describe it.
That's not a knife.
Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah, mate. 3 Crocodile Dundee films.
Oh, that's a good number after 10. I remember after Freddy vs. Jason, we got Medea, and we tried to act like 9 wasn't that big of a number. But it was like, it was a big number. All right,
so we've got Crocodile Dundee, Crocodile Dundee 2, and Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles. That's all for Film Franchise Fortnights today. Thank you for listening this long. AJ, do you want to tell us all your shit?
Yep. So you can find us on YouTube and Facebook and SoundCloud and iTunes and Instagram and Twitter, all under Cult Pop Show, and you can email us at cultpopshomedia@gmail.com. And also, we have a Patreon now, so you can actually donate money to us, and we'll give you podcasts that no one else can hear. So we just released recently our first episode of generic _movie _podcast.exe, and that was a chosen by our patrons that we review a certain film, and that movie was Josie and the Pussycats. So if you want to know what we think about that, go check that out. And in 6 days, we'll be releasing the first episode of Film Franchise Follow-Ups, which will be where we look at an old franchise that we've already covered and like explore some of the other non-film pieces of media that were made under that branding name. And I'm going to tell them, Richard, the first episode of Film Franchise Follow-Ups, to whet your appetite, will be the Back to the Future animated series.
So check that out on our Patreon.
Yep, that'll be real fun. And of course, if you donate as little as $1 to the Patreon, you can also suggest and vote on every second franchise we cover for this podcast.
Which we should put up now.
No, we
should
put.
So you've got until we record Crocodile Dundee to vote.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Let's do it.
Yep.
Cool. So
because it'll be full on following Crocodile Dundee. So check that out, and as always, like, comment, subscribe. Make sure to ring that bell so you join our notification squad, so you make sure you don't miss any new videos. Thanks for listening. Bye.
See you later, everybody.